Hello and welcome to today's video class. And in today's class, we're going to talk about narrative writing. I'm sure most of you would know that narrative writing means story writing. So today's class would be about story writing. Now, this is a very introductory and a basic class for narrative writing. And for those of you who think they have already practiced this kind of writing in the past, maybe they should consider it as a revision class for them. But for others who think that they want to learn something about the basics of this kind of writing, I'm sure this lesson would be of benefit to them, because they would get to know that where is this art of story writing or narrative writing coming from. And one of the key aspects of this class is that I want to share that story writing is something, or telling stories or writing stories is something that comes naturally to us, especially storytelling. This is a kind of a natural talent that we're all born with, and especially when we're kids, we have been telling stories to our friends and to our mom and dad and to our classmates about those events that we're a part of. And we have been describing those series of events in an interesting manner to people who we care about or who we are close with. And this is essentially what forms the gist of story writing. Telling about a series of events to someone in an interesting manner is what constitutes the foundation of narrative writing. And this is one aspect that I would be focusing on in this class. Now, let's get on with a formal beginning to this class. As I've been saying, that telling stories is a natural phenomenon, and most of us are born with this talent, and most of us have been telling stories as young kids, especially to our friends and to our classmates. I'm sure most of you, especially the boys, would recall a time when they had a fight at a school or an argument at a school, and maybe it turned into a fist fight or something physical. And later on, you would be sharing your experience or this event that you were a part of with your friends, or maybe with one of the school administrators or the principals, and sometimes back at home with your mom or with your dad. Now, another common experience that most of us have, or at least one of our classmates have, during early years of school, is that one of us brings their lunch to the school, and then during the break time, when we open this lunchbox, and once we remove the lid, we get to know that somebody has eaten that lunch. Or sometimes we won't even find the lunchbox in our bag because one of the friends or someone from the class has actually taken it away. So this experience can also be retold as a story to other class fellows, or to the teacher, to the class teacher, and to someone back at home, like your mom or your dad also. So talking about these common experiences that happen to us, and then especially talking about the events in a way that when you've experienced them for the first time, and then you want to share them with close ones, there is an excitement, or there's some sort of a suspense or interest, or maybe even if you experience something scary, you share it with other people with a feeling that connects you with your listener or with your reader, in case if you're writing it, and that is what makes your story more interesting or appealing to your audience. Now, one other thing that I would like to recall personally, as well I'm sure that most of you would be able to recall, is that once you have a bad dream, or a dream about a monster maybe, or sometimes in the dark, some young kids will actually be frightened because they think that there is a monster kind of hiding behind a place or in the dark, and that would be a scary thing. So these are all experiences that we've been sharing with our family members and with people who we consider close. And the way we share it, when you put in our feelings and what we saw and what we thought, it is normally interesting to the person who we are sharing it with, and they would love to listen to it. And this is what constitutes a story. A talk about a series of events that you experienced firsthand or were a part of or that you observed, and then you share it with another person. Now, most of the stories or most of the accounts that we share with our close ones are true events. We actually experience those things, these fights in the schools, or somebody taking away our lunch, or maybe about a bad dream or monsters. This is something that we've actually experienced or experienced firsthand. And these are true events, and we want to share them with our friends or with other people. But at times, our imagination kicks in, and we would want to add something to these true events just to make them more colorful and more interesting to our audience. And this is another aspect of story writing that I'd want you to be aware of, that especially as a writer, even if you're writing about a true event, you can add details of your own, constituted by your imagination. And as long as they make the story interesting for the audience, I think this is acceptable acceptable way of writing a short story, which most fiction writers would do. Now, before we actually talk more about this, let me share with you an example of a story that I've kind of created on my own. And this is a story that a young kid is telling to his elder brother. And this young kid has experienced a thunderstorm for the very first time in his life. He's very young. And then at the time when he was experiencing this weather event, his brother was asleep, and now he's experienced it and he wants to share his story with his brother. So let's just get on with this example and see if we can actually get a better understanding of what actually constitutes story writing. Telling a story. Now, here is this young kid who's telling the story about a thunderstorm to his elder brother. Last night, when you were asleep, the sky got covered with really dark clouds. I moved out of my room to look at them. The clouds moved very quickly in the air, and I could see them from our compound. They were so close to the ground. It looked as if they were just passing above our rooftop. And there was a strong wind too. The window panes and the doors of houses in a street started to bang. And the strong wind brought lots of dust too. Soon the compound floor was covered in dust, and I could taste the dust in my mouth. Yuck! At that time I thought of running back into my room, and I heard a few crackles of thunder, and a great streak of lightning lit up the whole sky. The lightning was so intense that I could see even the smallest things on the floor. It looked for a second as if it was daytime. Seconds later, I heard an ear-splitting roar of a thunderclap. It was humongous, and it brought my heart into my mouth. I ran inside towards my room. Mom held me close in her arms, and my heart beat so fast. I've never heard of such a loud thunderclap
in my life before. Mom gave me a glass of warm chocolate milk to calm my nerves. After drinking the glass of milk, I snuggled into my bed, thinking about lightning and clouds for a long, long time before going to sleep. End of the story. Now, this is just an account or a story of what this little boy experienced, the set of events that he experienced, and he's just trying to share his feelings and his observation in an interesting manner with his friend, with his elder brother, I'm sorry, in this case. And that, to me, is the essence of story writing. You share the set of events in an interesting manner with someone who's close to you, in an engaging manner, in an interesting manner, and that's what will keep the audience attention. Now, I have a short exercise for all of you based on the story that we have just read. As I've said, that some of you would already be knowing a few things about story writing and they would be comfortable with it. But I would suggest that all of you try your hand on writing this situation. And the exercise is that imagine you're telling one of your friends or a family member about something special that you experienced recently. Write a short account of it, right? So whatever you experienced, you share it with your friend. You've experienced something special or extraordinary, and now you want to share it with your friend. Try to write something that you've actually experienced firsthand, or at least that you've heard of. That should bring a more personal touch to your story, and I think that is something which makes the story more interesting to the audience. So I would suggest that when you write the story, you try to write about an actual event or an event that you were a part of. But even if you wish to make up something on your own, that should also be fine. So this is a short exercise that I would expect you to do. And before we finally come to the end of this class, let me just remind all of you about two important factors that I hope that you would be keeping in mind while writing a story. So the most important characteristic of a story, in my personal opinion, is that it should be interesting for the audience. There is nothing more important than writing a story which makes sense and which is interesting and which is captivating to the audience. Any story that is able to do that, in my view, is a good story. But if this first requirement of the story is not met, if it is not interesting to the reader, I'm sure that you would agree that nobody would want to read it, and it would not be considered a very good attempt at story writing. Now, what I'm trying to say simply is that when you're writing, try to write something from your heart. When your heart is involved in what you want to express or what you want to write about, it will automatically have more appeal to the reader, and the reader will be able to connect to it. If possible, try to picture your story in your head. You should be able to see pictures in your head about what you're writing. And if you're doing that, I'm sure that can also help you to connect well with your audience, and they would also be able to imagine in their heads what is it that you want to communicate to them. So that's the first requirement. The story should be interesting. It should be able to capture the reader's attention. The second important thing that I would like to share with you is that a story does not need to have a lot of difficult or unfamiliar words in it, especially if those words are meant to impress the examiner. I would request that instead of using unfamiliar words and trying to impress the reader with your vocabulary, try to express your story in simple, easy words. If a word or phrase properly fits in, I'm sure that's all okay. but do not try to push or force words into your story just because you want to know the reader that you know a lot of words. So this is something that would strongly advise you against doing, and I would expect that you would use words and phrases and write sentences in a simple, natural way. You would express yourself in words that naturally come to you. So as long as you write something from your heart and you've pictured it, and if the reader is able to connect with it, that is job well done. I'm sure that in writing a story, you would keep these two pieces of advice in your mind. And in our next class, we're going to discuss a more formal structure of story writing, and I'm sure that would add a lot more understanding to your understanding of story writing. But for now, I think we come to the end of this class, uh, and I hope that you try your homework also. Thank you very much.